Indiana was settled by men and women who left the safety of their homes. They headed westward and they crossed the Appalachian Mountains into the wilderness and the unknown. They were willing to endure hardship, to risk danger in search of a better tomorrow, to clear a path for others to follow. They were pioneers. But long after our state was settled and Indiana's population drifted up from the banks of the Ohio River towards Lake Michigan, Hoosiers never stopped looking at the frontier. Only they cast their gaze away from the west and towards the sky. In the fall of 1959, 15,000 people gathered in the southern Indiana town of Mitchell, population 3,500 at the time. Some lined the streets, others sat on rooftops or watched through windows. They hadn't come to Mitchell's annual Persimmon Festival for the beauty pageant, nor did they come for the pudding contest or the classic car run. No, they were there to see the convertible at the head of the festival's parade as it drove down Mitchell's main street. Because seated inside that convertible was one of their own, a local boy. They knew him from the house on Baker Street. Maybe they knew him from Mitchell High or First Baptist Church. But history knows him as the second American to travel to space and the first man to go there twice. So I'm proud to have the privilege to deliver these remarks in front of the presiding officer, who has also been to space. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Virgil I, Gus Grissom. Gus Grissom, there he is. A great Hoosier, a great American. I ask all who may be watching to study his portrait, that flat top haircut, the serious expression. That was Gus Grissom. They should look at old photos of the White House press events. It's uncanny. He's the odd astronaut out, the one who looks like he'd rather not be there. You see, the images don't lie. He was taciturn, tough-minded, and hard-driving. NASA's head physician described him as confident, but not conceited. He was a stern competitor, but a good teammate, a frank, but carefree speaker. He had little use for publicity or even the press. He only went to the White House events because his wife Betty and their boys wanted to. Gus Grissom wasn't a celebrity, he was a pilot and an engineer. He was more comfortable racing fellow Mercury astronaut Alan Shepard in his souped-up Corvette around Cape Kennedy. He was a regular guy. But the race that Gus Grissom truly cared about was the one to the stars. He was determined to beat Russia there. I think we ought to declare an out-and-out race with the Russians to put the first man in space, Grissom once stated. You see, this Hoosier didn't mince words. He saw the space race as an important global competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, between freedom and communism. And the prize was more than just a flag planted on the moon. It meant prestige and pride, yes, but also technological superiority and the national security and economic benefits that went with it. America won that race, in part because of Gus Grissom. And our nation reaped incredible benefits because of his sacrifice. On July 21st, 1961, almost 2 years after he was at the center of the Persimmon Festival in Mitchell, Grissom splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean 260 nautical miles south of Cape Canaveral. He had just rowed Mercury-Redstone 4 above the Earth and back down. Appropriately, Grissom nicknamed the ship Liberty Bell 7, a tribute, of course, to the bell that rang after the reading of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Regardless of what you've read in novels or seen in movies, Grissom's flight was flawless. The vessel sank after its hatch blew, the result of poor design and electrostatic discharge, not astronaut error. 4 years later, on March 23rd, 1965, friends and former classmates gathered at the First Baptist Church back in Mitchell. Nearly every business installed a television so their customers and employees could watch Grissom return to space. This was a different journey, though. The Mercury ships boosted astronauts into space and retro-rocketed them back to Earth. This new craft, Gemini, gave them a degree of control and added maneuverability. Technological leaps that anticipated manned flights to the moon. Grissom, along with pilot John Young, did not only skillfully guide Gemini 3 as it orbited the Earth 3 times, he virtually designed the ship. Stung by the hatch crap on Liberty Bell 7, as he called it, Grissom securitized and directed the assembly of the new aircraft. He'd direct the assembly of the aircraft. Their construction so closely followed his vision that other astronauts nicknamed the Gemini Gus Mobile. The cockpit and seat were even configured to his 5-foot 7-inch frame. Grissom was next given command of the Apollo program's first mission, with its goal of realizing President Kennedy's charge of landing a man on the moon before the end of the 1960s. When the Apollo lunar module landed at Tranquility Base on the lunar surface in 1969, Grissom was not aboard. He had perished 2 years prior in a launch pad fire aboard Apollo 1 during testing. The tragedy, though, inspired NASA to improve the construction and ultimately the safety of Apollo crafts, leading to the moon landing. Grissom said, "The conquest of space is worth the risk of human life." The race to the stars ended in America's favor because he gave his. Now, Grissom may not have been aboard Apollo 11 when it reached the moon, but it never would have gotten there without him. At the onset of that journey and the most daunting journeys Americans have embarked on, there's been skepticism, questions of purpose and value. It never stopped the pioneers, the doers, the dreamers, and Americans like Gus Grissom from making the voyage and making our country better. Back in the fall of 1959, during the Persimmon Festival, Mayor Roy Ira handed Grissom a plaque, and he gave him a simple tribute. "Mitchell is proud of Grissom. I urge our youth to take note of Virgil's example," unquote. 6 decades later, we're still proud of him. And we should all still follow his example and always press on towards the next frontier, wherever it may be.